We know it's the nature of a narcissist to drain your sense of power from you. And you know that too. You probably experienced it. It's because the narcissist feels more powerful themselves when they know they've robbed you of yours. Even when you've made it out of that narcissistic relationship, the sense of powerlessness that you feel or can be triggered into doesn't just reverse itself. Those feelings of being weak, feeling drained, sometimes feeling less than, little insecurities lurking around the edges, or even feeling like damaged goods, that can linger with us for a long time. And no doubt that we fight against it. But the very fact that we're constantly fighting against this is in of itself something that reinforces our belief that we really have lost our power. We try to fight against it, which is a wonderful thing on our part. I'm glad that we try to stand up and fight, but it shouldn't be a fight every day. And we also have to be aware that our spiritual enemy lurks around the edges of our life, looking for ways to reinforce that message conditioned into you that you're lacking in real power. But this week, we want to challenge you to consider if that belief is really nothing but a straw man, using the echoes of that past narcissist to intimidate you into submission. What if you're far, far more powerful than you know? Hint, you are, and we're going to talk about this week. As a matter of fact, I spent a little time brainstorming on this topic, and in a matter of minutes, literally minutes, like 10 minutes, I came up with 20 ways we can wield our power. Now, this week, we're just going to look at 5 of those ways and how we can begin exercising our power, reclaim our power, strengthen our power in each of those areas. So, Wendy, you want to kick us off with the first one?
Well, the first one you came up with and shared with me is the power of choice. We make choices all day long. There have been studies about how many thoughts we think and how many choices we make, and it's a shockingly high number. Some of these we make out of habit. We're barely even conscious we do them. Some of them we make very deliberately. Some feel tiny, some feel huge, but we make them. We make them all day long.
Right.
And so those choices, the big ones feel more powerful, right? Because it's like, oh, there's this big choice and it's taking me this way or that way. But a lot of times it's these tiny little choices that we make over and over and over and over again that build a foundation that we stand on and end up being really, really powerful. And they can be productive or not, godly or not, reactive, built in truth, built on lies. They can be all over the place.
Yes, for sure. And you know, those little choices that you were talking about that seem insignificant, like sometimes we don't bat an eye at it. We're just, and we can even default into these certain modes, but those are choices that we're doing. And this ties in with, you know, there's a reason why, if you've been listening to us, we always talk about at the end, you know, just focus on 1% improvement, because it's all that cumulative stuff that do it. And I remember, and I mentioned this story to you, Wendy, before we started recording, but so I had a mentor back in the day when I was pastoring. He was the one that I reported to. And he was also a therapist with like more than one licensure. Like he was a marriage and family therapist.
And there's certifications too. There's all types of,
and
you can get so many letters after your name. There's so many things you can learn.
That was him. He had lots of, like, he was a licensed mental health counselor, a licensed family therapist, and then like a host of certifications of specialty areas. But I remember when I first came on board and started working with him, and this was like, I did the bulk of my foundational recovery, healing, and changing was when I was working with him. And I've told him, like, there are crowns in heaven for you with my name on them because of the impact you've had in my life, you know? But early on, like, I had just started with him, and we had this support group ministry. And it was a large support group ministry. We'd have, you know, I don't know, it was like, it fluctuated a little bit, like 100 to 200 people every Monday night that would show up for this. And we had to do setup because we were using a borrowed facility, basically, and we had setup to do. And I remember one time, because I was overseeing certain things, and I went in there and I'm slinging chairs. And he came to me and he goes, I needed you over here. Why are you doing this? And I said, well, I can't help it. These chairs have to get up. We're going to be starting soon. And he stopped me in my tracks. I will never forget this. This is like 25, 30 years later. Never forgot this. I can still see his face in my mind. He leaned over to me very quietly. He had his, like, I called it his wolf look that he had on when he was like really serious. And he looked at me and he said, "You always have choices." And then he just turned and walked away. And I just went, whoa. And that message came home to me quickly. And it was an object lesson that I have never forgotten. So when we start to feel like I did, like, I just have to do this, I can't help it. I mean, what choice do I have? I just have to get these chairs out here. We're about to stop. I'm thinking I'm being very proactive. I'm a go-getter. I'm just making it happen. This has to get done. I'm just going to make sure it gets done. Nope. Apparently I was not, not only was I not thinking of what options that I had that I could choose from in that moment, I was just like defaulting and feeling powerless, feeling that my back was against the wall. I didn't have another choice. So that's
Weren't there people in the back of the room that day too who could have helped? That's what I thought. Yes. Yep. So you could have said, people, chairs are over there, tables are over there. I need 10 things set up and 6 chairs per table.
Yep. Because we're serving them here for free. We took up an offering, but so and that played into my leadership development as well, because you can be sure I never made that mistake again. And I started putting strategies in place.
But think about where you were in that moment. 1, you felt responsible, right? And 2, you felt like, if I'm responsible, I'm the only person who can make everything happen.
Right.
And 3, I don't get to ask for help.
That's right.
Even though there's a line of people at the back of the room who are just waiting for this to start. And we know each other. You're not a huge person. So those tables tend to be heavy, right? But we do that in so many ways. Your mentor gave you that gift, but how many times, like, I am sure there are so many people, I do this still. You're thinking, I'm responsible. I have to make this happen. I have to do all the planning. I have to do all the execution. I have to make sure it's there and everything's set up so that nobody else is inconvenienced, put out, asked, and maybe gets to turn me down. Oh, there's so many ways we could go with that.
Yeah.
But
it's rich with issues for all of us.
Yeah. But if that really did start a domino for you. That's a very small, insignificant choice. It seems like, could you guys come over here?
It was a paradigm shift for me.
Oh, yes. And how many of those do we all need?
Right.
Because not all of us lead support groups and have to set up 10 tables and 200 chairs, right? But all of us do have things we run, even if it's just dinner for ourselves or our families, or getting kids to school on time, or paying bills. Like, how many things do we have that we're responsible for the beginning, the middle, and the end?
Or we claim responsibility.
Yeah. And it doesn't occur to us that maybe we aren't responsible for the middle or the end. And we can just kick something off and let somebody else handle something.
Right. And without realizing it, we are reinforcing our own belief that I don't have choices. Therefore, I'm trapped and powerless.
And I have to do things I don't want to do, or somebody else could do. Yes. Being trapped and powerless doesn't always mean just standing still. Sometimes it means, and just so much energy that you put out, and so much time that you put out, and so much effort you put out. Trapped can look very different.
Right.
Depending on the situation.
Right. So one of the ways as we start to move out of this, one option we have is to predetermine our choices. Yes. And that can be, and it starts a domino effect in the right direction, because as we start moving in something positive like that, and we start reclaiming power through choices, and then that just builds in us. It builds our confidence in that. So the predetermining of these choices, one of those things is setting our routines. Yes. So we have routines right now. It may not be that they're unexamined routines that we just do by default, which may or may not be productive for us. So when we think about our routines and say, like, in my ideal world, how would I like my morning to flow? How would I like my evening to flow? How do I take care of myself? what would be the best ways to start my day off on a really positive foot?
What
You
needs to
know?
get done by the end of the day, by the end of
Mm-hmm.
the week? And how do I have to cut those tasks up so that they actually happen?
Mm-hmm. Another big part of this, and I'm a firm believer in this, and Wendy, I know you are too,
Mm-hmm.
is that we have to renew our mind. Those our choices that we're making are starting up here in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're flowing out of paradigms that we've defaulted into or were implanted
Mm-hmm.
because of the relationship with the narcissist. So just
Yeah.
like, for example, what you were talking about how we assume responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we do that in a self-protective way, in a guilt-laden way, maybe because the narcissist made it all our fault.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so now we're trying to do all this to not have to deal with that. Well, the narc's gone from there, but we're still rolling in that same
Yeah.
pattern because we haven't stopped to question it. I think,
Well,
what
it's become
options do I
a
really
habit.
have?
Yeah, it's become a habit of
Right.
everything's always on me.
Yeah.
Good, bad, everything's always on me.
So renewing the mind, that just goes right back to a scriptural premise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our time with the Lord. So that's our choice too.
Yeah.
Are we setting aside time for the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
If we're not, what is it that we're prioritizing higher than that? And do we really think that that thing is of higher priority? To even spend 5 minutes to just stop and just put ourselves before the Lord, to maybe worship him for a moment? Or how do we squeeze in throughout the day, no matter what, because he's always with us. We're just
Mm-hmm.
not always with him.
Yeah.
So what are we choosing to do throughout the day that's reminding us of his presence, that's engaging with him, that's maintaining a mindset of looking for what
Mm-hmm.
he's saying or showing us throughout the day? So Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, which what we're talking about, that's the pattern of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it says, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will, which means when we know what that is, then we can make good choices. And so another one, and we kind of mentioned this, but I'll just like lay this out in like a Christianese terminology, is abiding in him. And that's spending that time where you actually just linger with him in an unhurried way. When you carve moments out of your day to be consciously aware of his presence, or to thank him, or to just have worship music on and you just zero into the lyrics so that your heart and mind are worshiping. And that's so important, because even if we start the day off on a right foot, there's 1,000 things throughout our day that's yanking us in another direction. And now we're trying to overcome old habitual ways of being. So we
Mm-hmm.
need to abide in him throughout the day. And this goes right along with John 15:4, which says, remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. You must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. And that's ultimately what we want. We want the fruit in our lives. We want to be fruitful. We want to bear fruit, on behalf of ourselves, our families, other people, for the Lord. We want to have a kingdom impact because we are so fulfilled when we know that that's happening. So Wendy, what's a couple of first steps to reclaim our personal power, starting with choices?
Well, you have to remind yourself you always have choices.
Yes.
Because if we're making choices automatically, it feels like we don't have choices. It feels like we're just one foot in front of the other doing what we have to do. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, if you take a step back before you act and say, what if I were to choose differently in this moment? What would
Mm-hmm.
happen? Just see even what your options are for
Mm-hmm.
that habitual action, and just ask yourself, what if I had a choice that was different than this one? What would I
Right.
do? You can remind yourself, well, I always have choices.
Right. Make yourself a little sign if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Post it all over the place. I always have choices.
Yep.
That's the only way you can evaluate yourself. Like, am I just going with the flow here, which is a choice,
Yeah.
or am I moving myself with those 1% increments into a better
Mm-hmm.
path and making new habits, the habits that I
Yes.
choose to have,
Mm-hmm.
that are productive for me in
Or
my life?
even the habits that are just better for you in this season.
Mm-hmm.
Something that worked for you when you were 10 isn't going to work for you the same way at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. We need new choices and new habits and new routines for the season of life that we're in. And
Really good
things need
point.
to be reevaluated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the next little step beyond that, once we start determining what these are, so we have our intentions, what we're going to do. Well, now to put legs on those things, then we have to think it through at another level, determine how you're going to make yourself accountable in a good and healthy way, and how you're going to set yourself up for success. Like if you have a certain morning routine, are there things you can do to help you kick into that morning routine? Do you need to lay out clothes the night before? If you're changing your habits to get up earlier, I'll give you a couple examples for me. I'm a natural night owl, but I like it when I'm up early. I feel so much more in command of my day. But I'm not one who will wake up and jump out of bed. I'm more like my alarm goes off and I'm like, and immediately I start rationalizing to myself, oh, I can justify not getting up right now and everything. So knowing this about myself, I have to set myself up to succeed and set myself up to do this successfully often enough that it becomes easier and becomes my new normal. So I have on each side of my bed, I have like sconces on the walls that are like reading lights. And they both plug in individually. Well, on one of them, I set up a timer, and I set the timer for 5 a.m. and I keep it turned on. And now the timer operates that particular light, and it's on the far side of the bed. So I have to actually move if I want to like override my own intention to turn it off. It clicks on at 5 a.m. and it stays on until 7. You know, another thing that I've started doing, like I use Flow Club, where I do a lot of co-working through the day, and I started hosting in Flow Club as well. So if you're in Flow Club, look me up. I always have sessions in there. What I started doing was when I host, not only can I fit it exactly in my schedule for how I've chosen that I want my day to flow, I noticed when I'm hosting, I'm actually more focused and more diligent than when I'm just attending someone else's session, because I'll let myself get away with some things. When I'm hosting, something in me rises up. And I'm always aware of the passing of time and I do the chat only sessions. So I'm posting little encouraging notes or whatever in there as we get to certain markers. Well, that's impacting me very positively. I took that hosting to another level where I started with attending other people's early morning sessions. Like I could have my camera off and still go do my morning routine, but that means I had to have my tail out of the bed. I had to go check in the session and type in my list of goals for that session. And that has been highly effective. Now I've just started hosting the early morning sessions, which puts me accountable at an even greater level. And it doesn't feel restrictive. It actually feels very empowering.
Yes.
You know, so those of you listening to us here, think about for you, how can you set yourself up to success? What supports can you put in place throughout the day that even when you feel weak, it keeps you moving in the right direction, right, Wendy?
And you have a great point. A lot of times other people are the biggest help you have. If you want to exercise, arranging to meet someone at the park, to walk around the park and talk for 20 minutes is more likely to get you to the park to do the walk. For you, working with somebody online who's expecting you to be there because you open up the room and make things happen helps. And so it's a good idea to set things up. And sometimes too, it's simply not having something in your environment. If you don't want to eat something, we've all heard, you just don't buy it at the grocery store.
Right.
So there's lots of different ways you can set your environment up to help you by either creating friction, making things harder,
right,
or by creating accountability with a person, which makes things easier.
Right. There's a great book that we could mention to you too that taps into some of what we're talking about here, and it's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Great book.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is good stuff. We'd love to hear from you. Like, what jumped out at you? What's your takeaway from this episode? And you can email us, again, hello@AnnetteChesney.com. There's also a link for that. If you're listening to us on the podcast platform, then look in the description for this episode and you'll see a thing that says text us. You can literally click on that and send us a quick note. We love to hear from you. So we hope you come back and join us tomorrow. We're going to continue on this theme this week with part 2. And tomorrow we're going to start unpacking the power of your words, right? So that one's going to be really interesting. So we want to encourage you to be deliberate. Make the choice to partner with God and expect Him to do immeasurably more than you asked or hoped for. Remember, we're here with you. We're going to walk with you. We are going to challenge you all the time. And we hope that you find that challenging stuff to be inspirational, to be motivational, and to know that you're not alone in this journey. Like, we're all walking this path together and supporting each other. So remember, be sure to check the show description for the links that I just mentioned to you, but there's some other links in there too. That'll be really helpful with some other resources we've got available. Keep going, because we know your best is yet to come. We'll see you tomorrow.